Good afternoon to everybody. Happy Thursday, such a thing. First of all, thanks for everybody coming up. It's been a long time since we did webinars like this, which were a regular event in the lead up to Brexit. We hope we haven't lost our touch. As in most things, like we're more worried about the message than the presentation, you know. So if we're a bit rough around the edges on some cases, don't worry about it. It's more important that we get the details over to you. So along with my esteemed colleagues here, if my screen will just share, which is not really what it wants to do. Here we go. We're going to talk you through what we've done to, if you like, replace the single trade window option. And I should explain that, if we had more time and to actually put this together, it would probably be more polished, if you like. But we were sitting off the ENS declaration because of the single trade window option. That was always going to be there, and it was a free to use option. And when through budget cuts that was dropped, we sort of stepped up to the plate and said, well, we'll provide something to replace that, if you like. So our whole sort of rationale behind this was to actually make sure that hauliers who are intending to use a single trade window as a free option still have a free option. So we've kind of stepped up to that and said that's what we're going to do. So throughout all of this, you'll see that the CABIE ENS process is free to use. It's not free if we complete it for you. If you want us to do it for you, there's going to be a charge because that's what you'd expect. But if you want to do it yourself, then it is free to use. So today you're going to hear from me a little bit, not too much, hopefully, but then I always talk too much. And then you're going to hear from John Gibson, who's our head of product, who'll talk you through the actual process and what we've designed, or to be fair, what John's designed and how clever it is and how it works. And then Rob and I will go through the FAQs, which are largely based on the HMRC FAQs, only we've kind of made them a little bit more user-friendly, if you like. So without further ado, let's first do the basics. And for us, we're not getting overcomplicated here. This is for EU to GB, RoRo safety and security declarations. We're not doing air, we're not doing maritime, in fact, we're not really doing inventory linked. It's GVMS locations. We're particularly thinking here about Dover and Eurotunnel, because that's where obviously most of the European flows come through. So if you don't sort of fit that criteria, then listen in, but it won't be very good for you. So hey ho. So the basics, let's do the basics. First of all, this is a service that has an acronym, the ENS, which is the Entry Summary Declaration, which ENS doesn't even stand for, but it's always been known as the ENS. It's also called the GB SNS. It's also called GB ICS. So you'll hear it referred to a number of different things as GB Safety and Security, as the Entry Summary Declaration. You'll even find us sometimes we sort of pop between acronyms just because we're familiar with the acronyms and we do it by mistake. So whenever we're saying ENS, we also mean this. We mean the Safety and Security Declaration for EU GB movements. Remember, it's the EU GB flow. It's mandatory from 31st of January 2025, which is what, 15 days time. It's not mandatory on GBMS. So whilst it is mandatory that you create a Safety and Security Declaration from the 31st January 2025. It's optional to include that on the GMR. It's going to be optional for at least the first 3 months, probably 6, might even be longer. Making it optional doesn't mean the whole process is optional. It's just it's optional on the GMR. The Safety and Security Declaration, or ENS, as I should probably more accurately refer to it, is the responsibility of the carrier, not the importer, not the agent, not particularly the freight forwarder. It's the carrier, the person who is responsible for the active means of transport carrying the goods across the frontier. So in most cases, that's the haulier. That's not always easy because the haulier is often working for a freight forwarder and so on and so forth. So the haulier, who is legally responsible, can actually subcontract that responsibility, if you like, to the freight forwarder who's maybe providing the load, or the customs agent, In theory, and I say this carefully, if the trailer is unaccompanied, i.e. it's loaded unaccompanied in Calais and shipped to Dover as an unaccompanied unit, the provider of the active means of transport is the ferry company. So the legal responsibility then rests with the ferry company. That said, when we saw that on GBNI movements since 2021 under the Northern Ireland Protocol and subsequently the WINS framework, all of the ferry companies turned around and said, you're not loading without one. So They basically, although it's their legal responsibility, technically, all of the ferry company says we're not doing it, and unless you arrive at the port with an up-to-date, valid safety and security declaration, you're not boarding. So don't. I think our resounding message there really is, don't assume the ferry company is going to do it for you. Take it on as your responsibility. Equally, the timelines, it's 2 hours prior. It must be lodged before 2 hours. Sorry, 2 hours before arriving at GB, the GB port of arrival, or 1 hour before arriving at the Eurotunnel terminal of departure. Odd way of doing it, but that's the rule. Just get it in your head. You've got to have it with 2 hours before you arrive at Calais. Just work to that theory. Don't get clever with it and have different variations. Just say, well, look, I need one, and I've got to have one 2 hours before I arrive at Calais. To be fair, you're going to need a GMR anyway. So you've got to get that declaration on there. And I would, as much as possible, put the safety and security MRN on the GMR. Although it's optional, I try and get into that habit because it will eventually become mandatory. So. Okay, so you'll need a GB EORI number and a government gateway account like you do to access GVMS. And you need to enroll through the government gateway to submit GB safety and security declarations. Most people we've spoken to have already done this. And that's pretty much regardless of which software agent or method you're planning to use, because with most software or agents, they'll be acting on your behalf and using you as the responsible party and just acting on your behalf, as we are. So make sure you've got a GB EORI number. That can be a GB 0, so to be established in the UK. And make sure you've enrolled on Government Gateway where you got that EORI number. Make sure you've enrolled for GB safety and security declarations. Get any problems with that, we'll give you an email address for which you can email us and we'll help you through that process. It's very simple. It's just it needs to be done. The HMRC single trade window option has gone. It's no longer available due to budget cuts and new governments and all that. Therefore, you'll need a platform. You'll need software or a platform to submit the GB S&S declaration. Most people out there in the market are charged around about £7 per declaration. We only say that just so we're saying it out loud, because that's the sort of that seems to be the going rate that's out there. We've seen from various people, which is absolutely fine. There'll be value adds in that, and it's not going to kill the job. And if you're happy to pay £7 for the declaration, knock yourself out, sign up with an agent who will charge you that sort of figure, or a software company will charge you that sort of figure. We don't. Our service is completely free. It's free to use. As you say, if you want us to do the declaration for you, which right now we struggle to because it's a sudden influx of an awful lot of work. So we are doing some for our existing customers, but on the whole, we wouldn't have much capacity to take it on for new customers. So we'd encourage the new customers to use the free to use service, in which case there's no cost at all. It's one declaration per consignment, although it is possible to group all consignments on one declaration, with each individual consignment being an additional item on the group declaration. That's the rule. We're saying don't do that. We've structured it, or John's really designed it in a very clever way to structure it differently, to actually say we create the header, which is the truck, and then we create the consignments. As it looks and feels like one declaration with multiple items, it's actually multiple declarations. It's just the way we structured it. It looks like you're creating it as a long declaration with lots of different consignments, but you're actually creating separate declarations each time. The reason why we've done that is, look, it's a new service. Things will go wrong. Might go wrong our end. Might go wrong HMRC's end. It could be anything. So it's a lot better to actually deal with problems individually rather than a huge ENS declaration with 100 consignments on it and they're all blocked because one's blocked. So it's a lot easier. The only slight pain of that process is that you're going to have to put a lot of MRNs on the GMR. Pardon all the acronyms, but it's a lot safer to do it that way. So for every consignment you give us, you'll get a separate MRN. John, that's right, isn't it? I have to shoot myself in the foot with some of these things, but so everywhere, although it will look like you're creating a super ENS, you'll get an MRN for each consignment. So far, so good. What are the data elements? Well, in simple terms, it's this. So there's a header item which has got like your reference number, the EORI number of the GB EORI number of the carrier, or the GB EORI number of the submitter, the GB EORI number of the carrier, tractor unit number if accompanied, trailer number if unaccompanied, or trailer number anyway. Nationality of the transport, that's the tractor or trailer. Tractor if it's accompanied, trailer if it's unaccompanied. The seal number if it's sealed. The port of arrival, such as Dover. and the routing of the goods. This came up this morning on a developer webinar from HMRC, and I always thought it was routing of the truck, but HMRC were pretty clear that it was routing of the goods. So I'll cover that in a little bit more. That's why I put that warning triangle on it, because we've got a slide on that one specifically in a minute. But that would be your header. So that would be the constant for the vehicle, and it will be constant across all consignments that are routed that way. That's why I'll come back to that bit in a minute. When we actually look at what elements of that header information are available from the normal customs import entry data, it's not much. You know, the reference number, yes, probably. The tractor and trailer number, we don't need that for the import declaration. So we don't always get that because we're doing consignment first import declarations in a lot of cases, and it's tied to a vehicle later or tied to a vehicle via the GMR where they're all kind of grouped together. The seal number, we don't always have that. The routing, yes, we do. Sorry, the port of arrival, yes, we do. The routing, we never have. So there's nobody that says to us, can you clear our consignment from Poland? And by the way, it's coming via Germany, through Holland and Belgium and France. Nobody tells you that. So that information doesn't exist on an import entry. So when anybody says to you, you can automatically upload your import entry and it will create an ENS, that one, there's definitely going to be some other questions you're going to have to answer. Get down to the item level, it's a bit more like an import. So you've got the EU consignor, you've got the consignee in GB. Place of loading, we don't get that normally. Place of unloading, we don't get that normally when we're just dealing with import declarations. So these are required. This is actually the place of loading and the place of unloading, not necessarily the exporter, not necessarily the importer. Number of packages, yep, fine, normally get that. Type of packages, we always get that. Goods description, yes, we get that. But if you're actually keying this live, the goods description is free text, but you can't be too vague. And I'll cover that in a minute, hence the other warning triangle. Gross weight, fine, comes from an import declaration. The CMR delivery note number, often no. The UN has a number if the goods are hazardous, definitely no, never get that. And the method of payment for the transport. Like, how did the customer pay for this movement of goods? Was it card, cash, account? Never ever get that. So there isn't this automatic connection between an import declaration and the creation of an ENS declaration. So it became clear to us that we'd have to gather more data from the client in order to create the safety and security declaration, and therefore we needed to create a means to gather that data. And by creating a means to gather that data, we created CABIE ENS, which once you've given us the data, just press submit and you submit it. And then we don't even have to charge you for anything because you've created the data and you've created the declaration. So clearly within this, you can have, providing the routing is the same, and I'll come back to that in a minute, as said, you can have one header and then you just enter the items individually. As I said, it looks like a super single ENS, but it's actually going to create multiple ENSs using repetitively using the header and then using the consignment information later. It's awful doing these webinars because you have no idea whether anyone's listening or anybody understands anything, but it is what it is. John, you've got this to come. And Rob. So let's look at the commodity code. You don't need a commodity code on the ENS. Don't get confused where the EU is moving to ICS2, which is the EU version of the ENS. And on that, which is coming this year, you need a 6-digit commodity code for all items. So that's going to be a bit awkward. For the UK one, you don't need a commodity code, but you can't be too vague with the goods description. The reason why I've shown a picture of a little man with looking at a pallet is you've got to give a goods description. You've got to remember this declaration, this safety and security declaration, is so that Border Force, rather than HMRC, if you like, I've got enough information to examine the goods if they so wish to through risking, and also can identify the goods that they're looking for. So if your safety and security declaration says fruit, they're going to open the back of the trailer and get all of the fruit out because they're looking for fruit. If it says oranges, pears, bananas, apples, or whatever, whichever one it is, if they only want to look at the bananas, they'll only unload the bananas, or they'll only look at the bananas. So you can't be too vague. And actually on the list provided by HMRC of the terms you can't use and the alternatives you should use, i.e. to give more granular detail, honestly, one of the ones on the HMRC list that says you're not allowed to say it was stuff. So you're not allowed to say 25 pallets or 26 pallets of stuff. It's actually not allowed to be said. You wonder who would put that, but equally you can't put as list, addressed, goods. You've got to be much more specific. Imagine this is an information that a border force officer will look at this and open the back of the trailer and understand what he's looking at. So make it as accurate as you can without going mad, but equally you don't need to be as accurate. You don't need to be as granular as commodity codes. Right, the way we've done it, and we will come to the demo in a minute, which is probably the reason you're here really, not to listen to me, is we build it as the truck first. So the truck is the header, and then you add the information for each consignment that you're intending to put into that truck. You can amend the truck later, so you can create a fictitious truck initially, if you like, so that you can create all of the consignments into that truck, but as yet you don't know what that truck is. You only know that you have a loading plan for that truck, and then later on go back in and add that truck, and it will update everything, if I'm right, John. John's nodding, it's always a good sign. Good, okay. And then you add the consignments individually. Don't worry that you can't see the detail on those screens. They're just prompters. John's going to walk you through those in a minute. So you add the consignments as you go, and as I say, that creates the sort of consignment level data. If Iori is the customs agent, there has to be some hook for us here. If Iori is the customs agent and we've done a simplified frontier declaration or a full frontier declaration at this stage, unlike EIDR has been added later because it's a bit of a rush. But if we've given you the import MRN for a simplified frontier deck or a full frontier deck, you can enter that into the screens and it will populate. But I don't want to steal John's thunder there because that's a clever piece of work. And then you're good to go, and that will print off an ENS summary for the driver, because drivers like bits of paper. So if he needs a document to arrive in Calais confident that he's got a document with all the MRNs on it, then we can have a printout, or equally you can create the GMR based on all the MRNs that are in there. A couple of quick things then on that routing, and then I'll release myself and we'll go to John's demo. The routing, literally, this slide was amended today following discussions with HMRC, is that if, for example, in this example, you've got 4 loading points in France ending up at a French consolidation hub, going on a truck, crossing the channel and coming to the UK, that would be 1 header and 4 consignments because of the 4 exporters, if you like. If you've got that same situation, but 2 of the consignments came up from Spain to the main groupage departure point in Paris, for example, that's actually 2 headers, because the routing for the top one was FRGB. The routing for the bottom one was FRGB in the top 2 and ESFRGB for the rest because of the routing of the goods. I think this is a real challenge. I don't think anyone will go to prison if you get it wrong. But as a haulier, for example, if you're booked to collect a load from Stuttgart and it's groupage, you don't know where it came from. So you can only really use best endeavors. Like, you don't know whether some of that's come up from an Italian hub or come from a Polish hub. So if you don't know, I think you're going to have to initially in the early stages assume it's from where you collected the goods, because you don't have that enough granular detail, unless the freight forwarder or the groupage operator is going to give you that granular detail. So, but anyway, top one, 4 consignments, 1 header. The bottom one, because the routing's different, is 2 consignments, because the routing is individual for the 2. It's not common against the 2 headers. The header's the same information apart from the routing, and then you've got 2 consignments for France, 2 consignments for Spain. Hope that makes sense. No idea if it does or it doesn't, because I can't see anybody. I can now relax for a bit, and I'm going to pass you over to my esteemed colleague, Mr. John Gibson, who's head of our product. I don't know how to stop sharing.
Hello. Hopefully everyone can see my screen. So I'm going to walk you through the data journey for the customers. So we approach this from a groupage point of view, first of all. By solving that problem, we also fix it for full loads and importers. So when you log into our portal, you have the option to create an ENS, and we've split this journey into 4 steps. So as Rob alluded to, we've got the journey steps. So this is where you're the ENS requester, you're the person lodging the declaration, and this is the reason you need a GB EORI. You capture your reference for that shipment or that movement, that truck or container. You may not know your vehicle details at this point in time, but you can add them later. If you're not a haulier and you're the importer, you will need to mention the GB EORI of that haulier for an accompanied load, or that ferry company for an unaccompanied load. But in the case of you're the haulier lodging your own declarations, you can leave this box blank. We've then got port information, departure time and arrival time. And if they're being consolidated at one location in that country, you can mention that at the transport and journey level. But if this is being collected en route within France, for example, that would be identified at consignment level. And finally, on this journey is the routing. So as Rob alluded to, the countries for all the goods on that movement would be in the route for the transport and journey. When we add things, we collect further details and validate them as we go. So we collect the mode of transport, vehicle details, and nationality, along with the trailer or container number. Where the data is missing, we highlight that visually so that you can come back to it. So if we move on to the next page, you will get prompted to say, do you want to fix these errors now or save and continue? And we do show you visually as you progress through it. When adding consignments, we do support multiple consignments because from a groupage point of view, there's lots of shipments going on one truck. So from a EORI UK customer point of view, we've made this easy. If we're doing a pre-lodged frontier declaration, we'll provide the MRN for that pre-lodged import. We'll also provide the MRN if we're doing the Irish export. So we've got the opportunity here to use that MRN and populate the data in ENS. We do validate it because we only see our data. So if you're using a different broker, we don't have sight of that data, and we'll tell you that we don't recognize that reference. Where we do recognize it, we're bringing over that data to pre-populate, and this helps the whole process of you adding your data to the truck when you know what you're loading on each vehicle. You can add as many consignments as you need. Again, you may have missing information, so we do identify where you need to readdress missing information. But as you work through this, you again see the details and you can go into the items and edit them as you require. The third step is the seal number, the transport documents, and the transport charges method of payment. So you add this information. Again, you can add multiple documents if you require, or if you've got one transport document that covers all the movements on that load, you only need to refer to that one document. And you've got the option to add notified parties. So that's an optional field, but if there are other parties involved in that movement, you can add the details and the EORI numbers. The final step of adding data is just to make sure everything's valid. So we show here if there's any issues, you'd see indicators. But if everything looks good, we can then submit that to HMRC and you'd return to the dashboard. So these are all the shipments that you're expecting for this date range. And we show you where you've got errors, where it's accepted, or where it's a work in progress of building that ENS declaration. So it's all very visual and easy to follow through. Where you do have errors, we are building up error handling. So you can see a summary of what consignments have errors at the shipment level. And when you go to the consignment level, we've got red error pointers to identify where it's a customs error. So the key here is it's an amber if it's a data validation, but it's red if it's a customs error. And then you can go into the system and fix that data as required. And again, you'll get the error pointers showing you what you need to fix. Once that data is fixed and the declaration's got accepted, the shipment view shows you the shipment details at the top, and then all the consignments and the MRNs we've received from HMRC. So these are all the references that would need to be added to the GMR. And you also have the option to print this shipment. So you've got a printout that can go with the driver if Border Force require to see the entry security declarations on arrival in GB. So that's a brief run through of the data journey. We are in the process of building this as a fully fledged application. We are looking to have it available for use before the 31st. And as you can see here, we do have the error pointers that we showed you in the data journey. So you can see at the transport level what's missing. And when you go into a transport, you see the indicators of what you need to do. Again, where there's a HMRC list, we're using all the published HMRC data. And where we've got multiple consignments, again, you've got indicators to show you what's needed at what step. The final thing I wanted to show you is our knowledge base, which we're creating to help support you in using this application. So you'll sign up to this as part of registering for CABIE once we launch it. And this will walk you through the actions you need to do for adding users, doing declarations, error handling, and as well as detailing a lot of the frequently asked questions that we see as part of ENS. Once you've got access to this knowledge board, you also have the support form. So where you are having an issue and you need assistance, you can contact our customer services and they'll respond as soon as possible to give you the answers you need. So that's the end of the walkthrough. Back to Rob.
No, thanks, John. Look, it's difficult to do this thing so sort of two-dimensionally because you're just talking at a screen and going, I hope everybody got that. It is recorded. You will go through it. The other thing to recognize is that the process is free to use. It's 100% free to use. There's no tricks or traps with it or anything. We'd recommend that you do it yourself. If you need to use an agent to do the declaration, you can talk to us. And if honestly, it's just there's a volume of work coming that we're not sure, our existing customers are obviously going to take priority. And if there's more work than that, we just might not be able to take it on straight away. But we don't mind if if an agent wants to use this process to provide a service for somebody else. We don't mind. There is no transmission charge in this. We've gone directly into the ICS system ourselves so that we're not incurring any third-party charges. And we built this a little bit like I remember when we first were involved with Trader Support Service in Northern Ireland, and we built it very quickly to get it going very quickly, as we have here. It was described once by somebody as like building an aircraft in flight. And it is a little bit like that. This is better. We've had a little bit more time and more knowledge and more support. So we've come a long way in a very short time. But there is more to do. We want to make sure we've got a little bit more. Look, we're logistics operators at heart, so we know we want to make things as easy as possible and sort of try and make this declaration go away as much as possible, and certainly not be a burden either in terms of processing or cost. So that's the whole kind of ethos of why we're trying to do things. Anyway, end of pitch. Just to reiterate a couple of things John said there, or maybe he wasn't as direct enough because he didn't want to say it out loud. Was that we're actually saying that. Look, it's mandatory from the 31st. That week commencing, we will be ready for you to register and go live. In theory, week commencing 27th. I know that's tight. I know if we are your only solution right now, all of your eggs are in one basket. Very a British saying, but it means that it's risky for you. You're either going to have to trust us or hope that or also make alternative arrangements, but know that this is there in the background. I don't see any reason why it wouldn't work, because we're going to fall down just as much as you are if it doesn't work, because this is what we're using to create our own safety and security declarations. So it's the same platform we'll be using. So we have a vested interest in making sure it works. We are available 24 hours a day, both in terms of both in technical support, although this isn't a customs document. You don't need customs knowledge to do this document. You just need resource really to do it, and we've made it as simple as intuitive as possible. But there's no real customs knowledge in there. There's no country of origin, no valuation, no freight charges to be accounted for, or whatever, no duty, no VAT. So this is a trainee in an office could do this, and once they've done the first 5, they'll be flying through it, because it's just a matter of process. But we are available 24 hours a day, both in terms of technical support and IT support, because we are first and foremost a customs intermediary, secondly a software developer suddenly, which we normally were just doing that internally, but we've turned this outward, as we did with CABIE, really quite successfully. And the knowledge base and the error code guide is being built as we write, so that you don't get, when something goes wrong, and it will go wrong, you'll submit something, there'll be an error. You don't get a code that you just don't know what that error is, and you just stare at the screen wondering what the hell to do next. We'll give you real text, and if we can't give you that straight away, there'll be background support in the background, or there'll be support in the background that can actually direct you in the right way. The chances are the error is quite simple, like you've not put the number of packages or something like that, or you've not put the right description of the package type or something. So it's not going to be as technical as a customs declaration. Right, good. Let's do the FAQs. Now, the FAQs are based on HMRC's own FAQs. only we've dumbed them down a bit. We've gone less kind of legal and made them more sort of user friendly. So we're going to do a bit of role playing now. I love a bit of role playing. So I'm going to be the questioner, and Mr. Keegan is going to answer the questions for you, providing his acoustics hold up. So here we go. So does transit through UK require a safety and security declaration, i.e., if the goods are coming from GB through from EU through GB into Ireland, does it need a safety and security declaration? Rob Keegan.
Short answer is yes, it requires a safety and security declaration.
Boom, we're off and running. There's about 15 of these, by the way, so you've got to put up with us doing this routine for about 10 minutes. Okay, but yes, it does. As I say, there's no commodity codes, but it does require a safety and security declaration. I'm blocking my own screen here with some text. Can amendments be made to data after submission?
Yes, you can make amendments up to the point of arrival at the GB border.
For us, John, correct me if I'm wrong here, but a lot of what we were doing is rather than trying to go in and amend declarations, we were sort of deleting them and you could replicate them rather than trying to go in and dig a hole in it. Is that right?
So we allow them to amend declarations. So if a truck changes or a consignment's no longer on that ENS declaration, then you can remove it and resubmit that. We do also let customers duplicate shipments. So where the same truck's going on the same journey with the same type of goods, you can duplicate that and update it with the new vehicle details and ports and dates. So we do have easements depending on the type of journeys that are being made.
So that's almost like a clone function?
Yes.
Cool. Okay. Good. Thank you. Where's the next question? Oh, it's gone back to screen. Sorry. What are the timeframes allowed for cross-channel services? When do you have to submit the thing? Okay, basically.
So for Ro-Ro ferries, you've got 2 hours before the arrival in GB, but for the tunnel, it's 1 hour before arrival at the terminal in France.
Which is slightly cockeyed way of doing it. So look, for the operational sense, just consider everything's 2 hours. Don't be cutting it fine. There's no need to cut it fine, particularly as the declaration is not particularly hard to do. Like John's screens, there weren't many screens there. It's very clever in the back end, but this is as I say, this is not a custom. This does not require full-on customs knowledge. So this could there could be somebody taught how to do this fairly quickly, and you get things moving pretty quick. Who's legally responsible for the declaration? I won't ask the rest of the question. Who's on the hook if it goes wrong?
So the carrier is responsible for the declaration, but depending on the mode of transport, the carrier can change. So with accompanied traffic, it's the operator of the tractor. For unaccompanied traffic, it would be the ferry operator. However, commercial agreements are going to change who is going to be submitting the data. So like with Northern Ireland, where the ferry operators said we won't accept vehicles onto the boats without an ENS declaration, expect that to happen on the short straits down in Dover.
Cool. There's a good point there as well, is that, however, the responsibility for the accuracy lies with the party who's submitting the declaration. The legal, it's the same as a customs entry, really, is if you're doing a customs entry and you're a direct rep, the importer is responsible for the information on that customs declaration, but not if you've made a completely stupid error. Then that goes down to the agent who's responsible for the accuracy of the information put on that declaration on behalf of the person. So if you tell them it's glass and he puts bananas, then it's his fault he put bananas, but the carrier wouldn't necessarily be strung up like that. But make sure you're covered, make sure you got the right agreements in place, that it's the carrier's responsibility, it's the active means of transport that is crossing the frontier. That's their legal responsibility. Are import clearance agents required to ensure an ENS is raised or completed or attached?
No, again, it's the carrier's responsibility to make sure the ENS declaration is raised. However, they're unlikely to be able to do this in a lot of cases, so may subcontract out to agents as and when required.
Cool. But there's another point coming back to that one in a minute as well. It makes it even more, you'll get to understand why that is such a way. Will liability work the same way as direct rep? For example, like if I'm doing a declaration on behalf of you, I'm not liable for anything. Well, pick it up from there, really.
No, the Customs Direct Representation Framework does not apply to safety and security declarations. As the submission of the SNS declaration is by a third party, it will be based on commercial decisions and an agreement between the carrier and the declarant.
Yeah, so you can't sit there and say, well, I was acting for and on behalf of so and so, therefore it's nothing to do with me. If you're submitting it, you're responsible for the accuracy of the declaration. If you're the carrier, you're responsible for the declaration. Basta. That's how it works. So make sure you've got your liabilities covered off if you're using somebody else to do it for you. How are carriers' compliance and completeness of declarations ensured, i.e. is the MRNs on the GMR?
Short answer is no. The MRN not being on the GMR will not have an effect on compliance, but no submission at all will. So all ENS related compliance will be carried out post-border after the event. But we do recommend that you add the MRN to the GMR for good practice, as when it will become mandatory shortly.
And there's something we tested this morning, thinking like a logistics operator, and I'm not accusing anybody of anything here, but if you decide to make one safety and security declaration and then use that MRN on everything, you can't. The GMR doesn't sort of validate the content of the safety and security declaration, but it does validate the MRN. So the MRN must exist and it mustn't already have been used. So yeah, there was when this first happened in Republic of Ireland, for example, and we had safety and security declarations going into Republic of Ireland from day one. It broke, as these things often do, and it wasn't us; it was the revenue system broke. And in the end, they said just use this MRN number for everything. So don't be tempted to do that. Don't think you could create one MRN and just sit there in the back end, just going, "Oh, just use that, just use that, just use that." It won't work. You have to create one every time. Oh, actually, that's just reminded me of something that John reminded me of earlier on. When we're actually saying if EORI have done the import declaration, you can use the EORI, a frontier declaration, you can use the EORI MRN to populate the fields that it can populate within the safety and security declaration. Or if it's a movement from the Republic of Ireland into GB, if EORI have done the export declaration, we can actually use the Irish export MRN to populate the GB safety and security declaration, because we hold that data. If this was single trade window, we might do this slightly differently because they'd have access to everybody's data, but it isn't. It's EORI's, so we've only got access to EORI's data. Point made. How are conflicts between GVMS and, I can't see the screen, and the MR and the SNS system handled?
So there is no conflicts between the two systems. Safety and security does not look up to GVMS, does not look up to CDS. They do not talk together. So if you have a safety and security declaration, but you have movements under entry in declarants records, there's nothing for it to look up against so you can be safe to assume that nothing will be stopped.
And to make that point even more, is if your customs entry says 20 pallets of bananas and your safety and security declaration says 250 cases of bananas, nothing's going to go wrong there. It's there's no cross-matching of the data that's on the safety and security declaration to the data that's on the import declaration. You have to, as expression we used a lot in the early stages, where the customs entry is a fiscal entry and the safety and security declaration is like a physical entry. It's the physical movement of the goods rather than the fiscal movement of the goods. And right now there's no cross-matching between the two. So if the packages are different, they don't have to be the same. There's a sort of requirement in the back end to try and make sure they're the same, but it's not mandatory and it's not hard coded. Oh, screen's gone again. Hang on, 2 secs. Ah, yes. What happens if I just covered this? What happens if the SNS? Oh no, I didn't. What happens if the SNS isn't done basically before you arrive?
So Border Force will work with the carriers to ensure compliance is met after the event, but they won't stop vehicles at the border due to unupdated information.
And we saw that, didn't we, with IPAFs, when IPAFs went into kind of a training mode where you had to have an IPAFs declaration before the export health certificates came into force. And if you did them, if they were wrong, nothing went wrong. You just went into the sort of education process, and then you got contacted by DEFRA or Ashford Port Health saying, "Nice try, but you might want to do this next time," and there's be a bit of that going on. There's a lot of talk I see on LinkedIn and what have you. You'll be penalised. You'll go to prison. Your family will be taken away. It's none of that. Assume this in the first stage. It's best endeavours. Do what you can. If you get it horribly wrong, it will be a light touch as far as we can see, without it being publicly said it's going to be a light touch. But there will be certainly a process, particularly backed up by the fact that it's optional on the GMR, that if all goes wrong, you can still move, but you will get told off by teacher, really. At the end of the day, you'll be asked to go to the classroom and be told what you should have done. Okay. And then eventually you'll get fined, but that's a long way down the road. Will the SNS declaration reduce customs checks? Again, I can't see. I've covered my screen with your face. Sorry, yes, go on.
So safety and security declarations on EU imports will bring an important source of mandatory pre-arrival data to assist border force in identification. Basically, if there is a stop from the customs entry, that will still continue today. It won't stop a customs import declaration being flagged for a document check. They're two separate systems. So in short, no, if you are stopped today, you will be stopped tomorrow. But if you're not stopped today, you won't be stopped tomorrow, at least initially.
Yeah, that's a really good point. Like, if you consider the import entry as a customs document and the safety and security declaration as a border force document, and border force are there to identify drugs and illicit cargo and weapons of mass destruction, blah 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 blah, anything that's controlled. They're not looking for particularly from a customs point of view. They're looking for contraband and things like that. And they're getting that kind of knowledge now, that intelligence from the routing of the routing of the truck, where there will be high risk areas where they'll be able to see where that truck has gone. Yeah, that truck has been routed in a certain way, and that's a high risk area, or it's a repetitive load. Like we've seen cases in the past where trucks that are on exactly the same load every day become a target as a drug mule almost, because they know the truck stops at the same lay-by every time. So they start attaching things to the truck while the driver's gone off for a cup of coffee or whatever. So it's that kind of information that this gives more transparency to, if you like. Screen stuck again. Is there a system to ensure the safety and security data matches the CDS data? I know we've covered that, but let's do that again. So does it match the safety and security declaration with the import entry declaration?
It doesn't unless you use EORI for the customs entry. So if you use EORI for the customs entry, then yes, our data will match the safety and security data. However, if you don't use EORI and you're doing your own declarations, there is no match. It is up to the submitter to make sure that the data is accurate on the safety and security declaration.
That's a good point. Taught him well. Thank you. Is an individual ENS declaration required for the whole trailer or per individual consignment on a vehicle?
No, so initially you did have to have one ENS per consignment. However, HMRC and Border Force changed their minds due to high pressure from the industry, and you can have a single ENS for the whole trailer. However, based on routing information, it's unlikely that you're going to be able to make that work. So we do recommend having one ENS per one consignment. Again, error handling is a big factor here. There will be problems with CABIE SNS in the early stages, so please do submit one consignment, one ENS.
Good point. And look, we built it in a very practical way, in that the way you're creating the ENS on our system looks like you're creating, as I've made this point loads of times, looks like you're creating one big ENS, but it's actually going to split it in the background and create one for each situation where the routing is the same. So the truck and the routing is the header. You create the consignments, and rather it just be one with lots of continuation, it's going to create a single one for every one of them, repeating the header information and taking the consignment information each time. So it just makes error handling so much easier in the early stages, rather than trying to be too clever too soon, really. Last question. Do simplified customs declarations such as EIDR, which we use a lot, allow post-arrival submission of the SNS declaration? Don't answer just yet. By that I mean, like, just because we at the moment with CABIE and the way we approach things is that we create the record initially, so there's no need for a customs declaration at the frontier. We've got until the 10th calendar day of the second month to present the customs declaration. That's obviously a very valuable way of doing things because it de-stresses the frontier. And really this question is, can I also do the safety and security declaration after the frontier? Over to you, Rob.
Unfortunately not. ENS declarations must be submitted prior to arrival based on the timeline set out in the earlier questions. We appreciate that obviously it's saying you now need a frontier MRN, but the data requirements are very small. As you've seen from the demo screens, you can complete it in about 5 minutes. If we've done the Irish export, it's even less. Future releases will allow you to submit your data to EORI, non-controlled data. We will have it recorded in our system. We will give you a unique reference number, and you can use that to create the ENS declaration. But as ENS is a physical declaration for Border Force to intercept illicit goods, it will not make sense to allow a post-border SNS declaration.
Well said. Thank you very much. That's a big fat thank you from us, but don't go anywhere yet. We're going to turn that off so you can see our pretty faces again. That's all we've got to say. We're frantically in the background building everything so that it works. And we're also building processes for if it doesn't work, so that because you have to do that. Obviously, you've got to sort of build the business continuity plan at the same time as building the process. So because we're 24 hours a day and we're always, including Christmas Day, we're always available. We're building it in a way that we can always pick it up and help, but we don't want to. Because it should be good enough to do it, and also we don't want to stress our own operations too much by trying to be helpful and then burying ourselves in the process. So as much as possible, you've got to trust us and believe in us, so that the week commencing 27th of Jan, that's when you'll be able to register and actually go live and actually start doing safety and security declarations at that point. And you can do them before the 31st, by the way. You don't have to wait till the 31st, so you can do them. I don't know whether you can add them to the GMR before the 31st, but I've got a feeling that you can. Yep, Rob's nodding. So the week commencing 27th is a big week, so any holidays are cancelled basically. But I hope you'll sort of appreciate the efforts that we put in to sort of give this to the logistics industry as being a case of, this doesn't have to be as burdensome as it looks. It doesn't have to be so much of a cost as it might look, and you can still sort of operate and move pretty much as you did before, even with the single trade window option being removed because of, as I say, because of budget cuts. So hopefully that was useful. Rob, John, got anything else to add, or are you all happy with what you got?
All
cool.
good.
As I said, we will. Sorry, Rob. Sorry, we will share this recording after the event, so you can show your friends, so you can show it around the office and what have you, and also play it slower if you need to understand some bits, or screenshot it or whatever. And that it would include that email address on there. So if you've got any burning questions, we don't want to do it here because Q&As get a bit messy in this kind of situation. Just bear in mind that this is this safety and security declaration process that we built was to replace a single trade window, but is for EU to GB only and RoRo only. So that we've taken what is the bulk of the problem and sort of solved it. We were sort of created to cope with the additional work that was created by Brexit, and we do clearances for all other locations, but our kind of reason for being is to do EU GB and GB EU. So that obviously when it came to creating a safety and security solution, we focused on what we know best. So hopefully it's appreciated by everybody. Thank you for attending. As I said, we will share the recording with you, and have a nice rest of the day. Thank you very much. Thank you. Goodbye. Well said. Thank you.